Hi and welcome to History with Jackson. This week in our Dictators series we're on episode 2 and we're looking at Stalin. In today's episode we will look at how Stalin and his regime fulfilled the 6 characteristics that we looked at last week. So let's get into it. So characteristic 1 that we looked at last week was an official state ideology that was backed up by a body of doctrine. The official state ideology of Stalin's USSR was Marxist Leninism, and it was supported in a doctrinal body of work by the Communist Manifesto, Stalin's Foundations of Leninism, and his other paper, The Problems of Leninism. Marxist Leninism was the coming together of Marxism and Marxist theory and Lenin's theory of execution of that said theory. Characteristic number 2 was a single mass party, around 10% of the nation's population, who also were feverishly devoted to the party and leader. This party in the Soviet Union at this time was the CPSU, or the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. It had just over 7 million members in a population of 111 million in 1956, just after the death of Stalin. This feverish devotion to Stalin was demonstrated by his Foundations of Leninism book, or series of papers from his lectures, selling over 16 million copies in the early 1930s. Number 3 is a system of terror executed in a physical or a psychological way. These systems of terror were undertaken by the secret police under the command of Stalin's head of secret police, Yagoda Yezhov, and later Beria. These system of terrors were demonstrated under numerous purges, the Great Terror, gulags, internment camps, and extrajudicial killings, and show trials. It was estimated that over 20 million people died in the system of terror. Characteristic number 4 was the monopoly on communications. Under Stalin, this included the interception of written communications, the disseminating of information from a state-controlled newspaper, Pravda, and the limiting of new technologies such as telephones to the elite, to the trusted members of Stalin's government. And this also included the policy of self-criticism, where members of the public actively reported members that they were close to or other members of the public for suspicious anti-Soviet activities or communications. Characteristic number 5 was the state monopoly on arms. In 1918, the Bolshevik government outlawed the possession of weapons. This policy was continued under Stalin, and the concentration of weapons was further increased so that only the army, the secret police, and certain other members held these guns. And number 6 is economic centralization. This included mass nationalization of key industry and infrastructure, or nationalising the means of production, and the collective ownership or collectivisation of agriculture. State planning and directing of the economy was also included in this, so this led to 5-year plans where the government set out goals and priority areas within the economy. So I hope this has given you a good idea of what Stalin's regime was like. You know, these 6 characteristics really show the brutality of Stalin's regime, but also the drive towards industrialization which Stalin was able to achieve. After Stalin's death, the Soviet Union went on a period of de-Stalinization, which was the removal of the cult of personality and the rolling back of terror. So as always, I'd like to recommend some books which help me with my research here. I've used them a lot for several essays for about 4 or 5 years now. So firstly, I'd like to recommend The Dictators, Hitler's Germany and Stalin's Russia by Richard Ovary. This is a great book. It's a comparative book which compares Hitler's regime and Stalin's regime. They are two great dictators in terms of history, very brutal regimes, and the comparison touches on many areas. So I definitely recommend that. Secondly, if you're interested in learning more about the terror, the Azovchina, and the brutality of Stalin's regime, have a look at The Great Terror, Stalin's Purges, or Purge of the 30s by Robert Conquest. It's a really good book. It really outlines all the areas of terror which Stalin created and went for, so dekulakization and stuff like that. It's really quite interesting. One thing to be wary of that is Conquest's figures are often overestimated, but really good book, really good history book. If you want to look more into the figures, there's some work by Stephen Wheatcroft which I really recommend. And finally, if you're just looking for an easy narrative read on Stalin, I'd recommend Stalin, the Court of the Red Tsar by Simon Sebag Montefiore. It's a really easy, quite nice read actually. Simon Sebag Montefiore has done several narrative histories which are really nice, really easy to read as well. So I leave you those three. The link to all three of them will be in the description on my website, which is www.historyofjackson.co.uk. I look forward to next week and having you join me for the third episode of this series, which will be on Hitler.